3 weeks ago I participated in the Brackeys Game Jam 2021.1 and managed to create this game. This is how I made it. The theme was Stronger Together. At first I was thinking about a co-op game, as a lot of people did in this jam, but I quickly passed that idea away because most of the people in the jam are just testing the games alone. There is also the option to create an online multiplayer game, but that would have been hard to host without dedicated servers. The other reason against creating a co-op game was Unity's input system. I had bad times with it, and I knew if something wouldn't work as it should, I'd have a very difficult time fixing it. So instead of making a co-op game, I just decided to make a single player game. After a few hours I came up with an idea. A top-down / sideways view game where you need to free souls to become stronger. Thus, you are stronger together with the souls. At this point it was like 5 hours into the game jam, so I just went in and started prototyping. By the second day all of the necessary gameplay features like movement and combat were finished. For the combat I gave the player 2 different kinds of attacks. A melee and a ranged attack. The melee attack was just a half circle sprite which I gave a hitbox. I summoned it behind the player, then increased its scale so it seemed like the player attacked in a specific direction. But all I did was just rotate the sprite where the player was facing. The ranged attack works very similarly to the melee attack. I summoned a bullet behind the player, then gave it a direction to move towards. After I finished the attacks I also added the dash ability for the player, which later I made so you can damage enemies and break ropes with it. Despite what I said about Unity's input system earlier, I still chose to go with it, mainly because I wanted to support as many input methods as possible, and supporting all kinds of different controllers wouldn't have been that easy with the old input system. And with the new input system it was way easier to add controller rumble, which gave the game even more feel. On the third day I made the enemy AI. The enemies were the same as the player, so the movement and the combat were just reused from the player controller. But I still had to make a lot of modifications so they could control themselves. I made the enemy behavior into a scriptable object, so I only needed one script for all the enemy types. I created 4 types of enemy behavior. The first type just basically follows the player and just goes into them, nothing really special there. The second type does the complete opposite. If the player is near to it, the enemy goes into the opposite direction. The third type is a lot similar to the second type. It avoids the player, but this enemy also returns to its starting position when the player is not in the distance anymore. The last enemy type is the first 2 types combined. It follows the player, but when it comes too close to the player, the enemy avoids them. I also added a unique ability to the enemies, which the player didn't have. If a bullet is near an enemy, that mentioned enemy can summon a 360-degree shield around it, thus blocking the bullet. I mainly added this ability to either force the player to use melee attack or charge up its ranged attack so the enemy has no time to react to the shot. This is also the time when I implemented the theme to the game. When you kill an enemy, it summons a soul, which follows you until you pick it up. Collecting these souls increases your max health, and also gives back some HP if you are not fully healed. After I finished the enemy AI, I started to work on the camera. Until this point I was just using a camera controller script that I took from another project of mine, which just followed the player around. But I didn't really feel like that camera movement fit the game. So I searched a bit on the internet and discovered Cinemachine's track and dolly feature, which was exactly the type of camera movement that I needed for the game. After I decided how the camera should work and set it up, I started to make a transition between 2 areas of the map. I added a trigger to every area that I made and showed the transition whenever the player entered the new area, which also changed the track that the camera was moving on. I also added camera shake and control rumble when performing actions like dashing, attacking, shooting or hitting a wall, which made the game feel really nice to play. At this point I was done with most of the gameplay elements. The only thing that was missing were the environment and sounds. so I started to experiment with different kinds of foliage, like grass and bushes, and I managed to create an environment which reacts to the player or any moving object, with only one simple line of code. Of course, one line of code isn't enough to create a whole dynamic environment, so every grass and bush has a rigid body and a few joints to make this work. Doing this also meant that the game would be on the resource heavy side, but I think it was well worth it. After I was done with the bushes, I thought, if I have bushes, why not add vines? So I searched vines on the internet. No, not that kind of vines, these kinds of vines. After a bit of searching, I found a video which showcased a very similar method to what I used to make the bushes. It's just a lot of lines connected with joints. And because this solution also used rigid bodies and joints, it was perfectly compatible with my already existing foliage script. One of my friends also suggested that I could add some sort of spice to the game, but ordinary spice wouldn't be that cool, so I took that idea a little bit further. I made dripstones, which fell down from the ceiling if you made any vibrations near it. I was done with every type of foliage, so I started to create the areas for the game. I was experimenting with the colors for the background, and I accidentally created this cool looking deep cave. I thought this was really cool, so I kept it, but I needed to make some modifications because you literally couldn't see the enemies there. At this point the game looked cool and everything, but I really needed a background. At first I didn't know what to do for it. I was thinking of a parallax effect, but that wasn't logical for the closed cave-like space where the game took place in. So I just decided to draw a few squares and see how it looks. Luckily it looked really cool, so I stuck with it and continued making the areas. This time with backgrounds. After a few hours of work I was done with 3 areas. The tutorial, the dark cave that you seen earlier, and the area where the ending of the game is. I also made a little cutscene for the ending. At this point the game didn't have any sound, but I'm gonna show you the version with the sounds, because it is a lot better. Only 2 days were left, so I wanted to finish everything in the game so I could use the last day to make as many areas as possible. I added the sound effects, blurred the background a bit, created the credit sequence, and made some quality of life changes to the game. I was done with everything at this point, so I used my remaining time to make as many areas as I could. I added another 2 types of areas, a blue and a green one, ending up to 4 different looking areas. In total I managed to create 8 areas, with more than 120 enemies in them. With 3 hours left on the clock, I made the H page and submitted the game. It has been 2 weeks since I submitted the game, and the rating period was over. I was eating my lunch when I got a notification on my phone. I couldn't believe it. My game got 2nd place in 3 different categories, and the 3rd place in the overall category out of 2,000 other games. I was really happy with how the game turned out, but I didn't expect almost winning the jam. I would have actually won either the game design or the fun category, because the first one was the same as the overall winner. But unfortunately I wasn't eligible to win because my game only got 10 ratings. And for winning you had to get at least 20. So the 3rd places were announced as winners. But despite that I'm still really happy with the results. I think this is the best game that I made so far. And I'm really happy that the other people liked it as well. Anyways, thank you for watching. See ya!